I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. Today, we're talking about how to organize your fabric stash so that you actually sew from it more often. We're going to cover 5 easy steps you can follow that'll make your stash easy to shop and renew your love for the fabric you already have. So, Haley, what's your luckiest fabric find?
Sorry, this is such a hard question. I've actually been on a little bit of a fabric buying fast in the last year. The last time I bought fabric was like 9 months ago.
That's great.
I know. It is great. Good for me, right? But the last fabric that I bought was a remnant, and it was from Bolt, which is a store here in Portland. They have an online shop, so go check them out. They're wonderful. But something I love about them is that their remnants are all like 2 yards or more. So it's always enough to make something out of. And I got this French terry, and I'm not a purple person, not a huge fan of purple, but it's this like a really pretty purple French terry, and it was a steal. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but it was like $10 or something.
Yeah.
And I've been really excited to make myself like a really cute like quarter zip sweatshirt out of it. And that just felt like a really lucky find to find something that was such high quality for such a deal. So I was stoked about that.
That's really cool. It's always so great to find something that's so practical and usable like that, and especially in a larger piece. I love that they have 2 yards or more for their remnants. That's really cool. I didn't know that.
It may not be 2 yards or more, but it's always like a usable amount, not like half a yard. You're like, well, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing with half of a yard of wool?
That's what I'm always trying to get rid of, are those scraps that I just...
Right, I don't need more of them.
Purpose for them. But somehow I can't just get rid of them for some reason. They're too pretty. I think my luckiest fabric find that came to mind for me is I went to an antique show years ago, probably like 5 years ago. There's an annual antique show here in Portland, and it's just one of those big like indoor flea market kind of things. And there was a booth that was selling all this vintage fabric, and they had all of these beautiful cold rayons from the 40s that were really inexpensive. It was the end of the day for the show, so they were just kind of getting rid of everything. And I bought a whole bunch of them, and I still have a whole bunch of them because I haven't cut into them, or most of them anyway. But they were just so beautiful, and I don't know, I can't resist fabric like that. I can't resist those beautiful vintage rayons. So that's what comes to mind for me as my luckiest find.
That is very lucky. That is a good one.
There's one in there that I haven't figured out a good use for it. It's sheer. I don't remember if it's rayon or silk, and it's either a dark navy or black, and it has these really huge flowers on it. And it's really pretty, and there's quite a bit of it, but it's in pieces. It's not all one continuous length. And so that stopped me from finding just the right use for it so far, but it is so pretty. I just like to pull it out and look at it every once in a while. All right, well, we're going to talk about using your fabric. So if you're anything like me, you tend to buy more fabric than you actually use. I'm not a huge shopper when it comes to fabric. I really do try to buy only what I'm going to use in the near future, but I still have quite a big stash, and it's still more than I actually use. Because the thing is, when you see a beautiful color or an unusual print or a perfect texture, I think your scarcity brain kind of starts to kick in. And for me, fabric shopping can give me really major FOMO. I was just talking about this with Ken the other night. I was putting away some fabric that we had just washed, and he was like, oh, I guess the thing with fabric is that you don't know if they're going to have it next time you go back. So if you see something you like, you feel like you have to buy it. And I was like, yeah, exactly. It's exactly how it works.
So understanding.
It took him this long to notice that, I guess. But I have noticed something, which is that the more I pay attention to the fabric that I already own, the more creative I get with what I'm making, and the less inclined I am to overspend at the fabric store. So once again, I think it all comes down to being more intentional. And I actually have a YouTube video coming out this week that's all about sewing from your stash. So be sure to visit us on YouTube if you want all my tips for using what you have. But today, we're going to talk about one part of that, which is organizing. We're going to be talking about keeping things organized in such a way that it's easy to see what you have and to find the right fabric for the right project. So, Haley, what's the last fabric you bought? Was it that French terry?
It was that French terry.
That was the last thing.
I went to Bolt to get a bunch of notions before I went on maternity leave.
Oh, wow.
And so I was buying notions for all of the photo samples that were going to happen while I was on maternity leave. And
so we know it was more than 9 months ago.
It was a little bit. My baby's about to just turn to 9 months old. So it was slightly more than 9 months ago. And I was like, well, I'm here. Look at the remnant bin at least. And I saw it. And one of the people who works there was like, oh, that color would look really good on you. And I was like, I know. I'm going to buy it.
Is it a light purple?
It's kind of a light-ish purple. And it has kind of a pinky undertone to it, kind of lilac-y.
I feel like you would look good in purple, actually.
Yeah. I think I will. And I was like, I don't wear purple hardly ever. And so I was like, this would be really cool with like a pullover quarter zip or something like that, little like sportier. I feel like I could see myself wearing it.
Yeah, that'd be really pretty.
What about you? What was your last fabric purchase?
The last fabric that I bought was from Mood. And it's from one of my spring projects, which I'm making a vintage pattern actually, which is a 1930s. It's actually a nightgown, but it has sleeves, so it looks like a dress.
Oh.
But I'm making it's kind of long, and I'm making a short version of it. So I'm making that, and I found this rayon challis. It's actually a rayon jacquard print, but it's like light, like a challis, and it has these big flowers all over it. It's got a black background and these really vibrant roses and other flowers all over it. So it's very Sarai.
Yeah.
And I love it. Every time I look at it, I'm really excited about making this dress. I think it's something that I'm going to wear year round probably, which is why I chose a darker fabric, because I think it's going to look great in the summer and be really comfy, but I can layer it with tights and sweaters later in the year. So super, super excited about that.
Oh, it sounds cute. Do you tend to shop with specific projects in mind when you're looking for fabric?
Yes, usually I do. I think going through the Design Your Wardrobe planning process really, really helps me with that because I know what I'm going to be sewing for my next several projects, and that makes me focus a lot more on what I'm buying and not just shop for things because I like them, but actually have a purpose in mind for them. So it really, really helps me with that. I feel like I didn't used to do this. I would buy fabric for my next project maybe, but then when I'm at the fabric store, I'd see something else and that would spark another idea for another project, but then I would never make that other project and I would move on to the next thing, and that's how my fabric stash would just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
But now that I have kind of a queue of projects that, is for a couple months, 2 or 3 months, it really helps me to focus. What about you?
I think that it used to be very 50-50 for me. I would just kind of like take the inspiration as it came. So if a fabric was really called to me and inspired me, I would buy the fabric and figure out the garment later. Or, sometimes it worked vice versa. But then I ended up with, I don't have a huge fabric stash, but definitely more than I can use. And it just started to feel overwhelming that it was inspiring, which was why I made the intentional choice to slow down my fabric buying. I didn't really give myself like a timeline or constraints on it, but just the idea that I don't know, the intention of that what I have is too much and I need to start using it.
Yeah.
And it's been really like a fun creative constraint to have. And also it feels like free clothes.
Yeah, it does.
I'm saving so much money
that I already spent.
But, that's, I think, girl math, they call it. All right, well, let's get into these organizational tips. Maybe I'll learn some things along the way. So the first tip or step is to do a stash audit. Just like our closets, our fabric stashes need periodic clean out. This serves 2 purposes, really. It allows you to make space and get rid of things that you don't use, and it reminds you of all the great stuff that you have. When was the last time that you cleaned out your stash, Sarai?
Oh boy, it was a while ago. I do little clean outs every once in a while and get rid of, kind of smaller pieces, things I'm not really going to use. But probably the last time I did a big clear out was when I moved into the sewing shed, which was over a year ago. It was probably a year and a half or almost 2 years ago. So it's been a little while. What about you?
Actually, yesterday I was going through my stash, pulling out fabrics for my summer sewing plans, and I started making a little pile of things that need to get gone.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm doing one right now. Eric's out of town. My husband's out of town this weekend. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to use like nap times this weekend to do little bits at a time. I just need to get it a little under control. I was getting frustrated because it was hard to find what I was looking for. So that's how it goes for me usually.
Yeah.
I get frustrated and annoyed, and then I have to do it all at once. And yeah, here I am.
Yeah, I hear that. I could use a little clean out. I'm overflowing right now a bit. So I could probably use a clean out and get rid of the smaller pieces, all those things that I hold on to.
Yeah.
Actually, I made a pillow last night with the leftover Sherpa from the Sherpa jacket that I just sewed that went up on YouTube. We had this pillow in our living room that it was a linen pillow that I made years and years ago, and it was so worn and threadbare. It had a huge hole right in the middle of it. And I had my family over the other night. I was like, oh, this is embarrassing. I have a pillow with a giant hole in it sitting here. So I made a new cover for it. And so I got rid of a little bit of fabric that way. And it was a bulky one. All right. So the next step is to categorize the fabric. So when you categorize the fabric, use a method that just makes sense for your project. So I'll tell you how I do it. Most of my fabric is in drawers under my cutting table. So I have a cutting table that has drawers beneath it. And I have a drawer for silk and rayon. I have one for cotton and linen. I have one for miscellaneous fabric. I have one for wool. And then I have a big drawer that's just for knits. Actually, I also have a drawer that's just for interfacings. And what I like is that this corresponds to different types of projects that I might sew. So drapey and flowy fabrics are kind of in one place. These more crisp fabrics are in another place. Warmer fabrics are in another place. And then knit fabrics. So if I have a project in mind, this makes it really easy to shop my stash just by having them separated out like this. And then I use a label maker to label each drawer. And that brings us to our next tip.
So our next tip is to label your fabric. It can be really helpful to label each fabric in some way so you know what you have. We talk about categorizing them. So if you want to keep it really simple, you can just leave it at that. And you can label each container with a fabric with a category. So like a drawer full of knit fabrics. But if you want to get even more organized, you can label each individual fabric with helpful information like the fiber content and how much yardage that you have. Swatch cards are an analog way of doing this. You can cut swatches of each fabric, staple it to a card, and then write the information about it on the back of the card. Sarah, you did this recently, right?
Yeah, I did. So you can find a video about this on our YouTube channel. I think it's something like 5 ways to organize or something like that. You can find it on our channel. But what I did is I took swatches of all of my fabrics, and I stapled them to business cards. So you can buy blank business cards. And then I bought a binder, or I had a binder, and I bought inserts that are meant to hold business cards. So like plastic inserts where you can put business cards. And I labeled each one and just put it into the binder. So then I had a binder of all of my swatches. So that's really, really helpful for knowing what you have and then how much you have. I've found that to be super, super helpful. And it's really helped me with using what's there, because if I have a project in mind, I can go through those swatches and see how much I have, which is a little bit hard to do when you're just looking at your fabric.
Yeah. I like how accessible that method is.
Mm-hmm. The next tip is to photograph your fabric. So if you want to organize digitally, you can even use a tool like Notion or something like that to help you with organizing it if you photograph your fabric. So you can actually create a little database in Notion, and you can include tons of information like what's the main color, where you bought it, how much you paid for it, all that information that's helpful for you. And you can do it digitally if you want to do it analog. And the cool thing about this is that it's searchable, and you can have it on your phone when you're out, so you actually know how much you have, which is really helpful. And you can put notions in there too, which for me, that would be the most helpful thing, because I often don't know if do I have the right, do I have top stitching thread for this? Do I have the right needles? Do I have a zipper already? And it kind of prevents you from buying things twice. I think the downside to doing this digitally is that it can get a bit overwhelming and overly complicated. If you're like me and you have a tendency to over-engineer things, then it can get to be a little bit too much. So I did this with my garden last year. I made a little planner for myself, a big planner for myself in Notion, and I really carefully categorized all the seeds I planted and made calendars and created this really elaborate planner. And I had pictures of everything that I was planting. And then after I did that, I barely used it because it just felt like so much work to maintain it when really a checklist would have been sufficient. So just be careful and think about the right level of simplicity for you. And this is one reason why I stick to analog and something very, very simple for organizing my fabrics, because this is a trap I can easily fall into. It'll become my next job is just organizing my fabric.
Yeah. I think that's a really easy trap to fall into for sure.
Yeah.
All right. And our final tip is to create a fabric queue. I do this every season. Once you have everything good and organized, you can pull aside the fabric that you plan to sew with next and create a little fabric queue for yourself. What's great about this is it's a visual reminder of the things that you planned on sewing in the near future. It can really help you to stay motivated and to use those fabrics. You can also place them in a little pile on a shelf in a nearby basket, or try what Sarai did and put them into a file box. Sarai, can you explain your file box method to us?
Yeah, that's actually in that same YouTube video. So if you want to see an example of it, you can head over to YouTube and see it. But basically, I have a file box. So you probably know what that is. It's like a box that has folders that slide back and forth on it. And I drape the fabric over each of those folders in the box so that it creates this really neat kind of queue of fabric for myself. And that's where I keep the fabrics that I'm planning to sew with next for my upcoming projects. And I keep that on a shelf because before I had them in a pile on the shelf, on this bookshelf in my shed. And when I would try to pull something out, see how much yardage I have, that kind of thing, it would just get really, really messy and everything would fall over. And plus it's exposed to the sunlight. So there's that too. Yeah. So if you keep it in a box like this, it's just tidy and organized and it looks very, very neat but keeps everything kind of separated for your next batch of projects.
I mean, anything to keep me from having to refold the same piece of fabric 20 times, I'm a fan of.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I'm going to do a quick recap on the tips that we shared today. Number 1 is to do a stash audit. So just like your closet, you want to audit your stash, clean it out every once in a while. Categorize the fabric, so separate it by the type of fabric. And the way you do that can be up to you depending on how you tend to plan your projects. Label the fabric, so it can be really helpful to label it not just with the type of fabric, but also the yardage. And I gave you an idea for using business cards to do that. Photograph your fabric so you can organize it digitally if you want, but remember to keep things as simple as you need them to be when you do that. And create a fabric queue for yourself. I like having a physical fabric queue for myself, and you can use a file box to do that like I did, or you can just keep them in a little pile for yourself, whatever works for you. So what's your big takeaway, Haley?
I think my big takeaway is that when you're considering systems of organization, always go the simplest route. Think of when you come up with your system, whatever it may be, ask yourself, how can I make this simpler? You're more likely to continue to use it and keep it organized if you keep it as simple as humanly possible. I, like Sarai, have a tendency to over-engineer things, and I find that the less is more when it comes to these types of things.
Yeah. That's a lesson I keep learning over and over again. I think related to that is think about the goal that you have ultimately if you're organizing. So is it to actually use more of this fabric? In that case, you might want to prioritize knowing what you have, knowing how much yardage you have, and pairing patterns and fabrics together. You could even keep a list of ideas for each fabric with the fabric or the type of thing that you wanted to sew with it when you bought it. If your goal is really to use what you have more, if your goal is more to keep your space organized and to keep everything just tidy, then that might be a little bit different for you. But just think about what your actual goal is when you're coming up with your organizational systems. And that's something that's always been really helpful to me. All right. Well, we've talked a lot about organizing your stash today so that you can use it more. But another thing that I find really helpful that I mentioned earlier is planning out my projects. That way I can think really seriously about how to use the fabrics I have for the projects that I'm going to make each season. And if you want to do the same, I'd invite you to check out the Design Your Wardrobe program. So when you join Seamwork, you get access to our really popular Design Your Wardrobe premium course. And the summer 2025 season is about to start, but there's still time to sign up this week. So it walks you through a process of designing a collection of projects for a season. And it's available as a self-guided program, or we run it as a group course 4 times a year, which is what is coming up right now. So you can learn more at seamwork.com/go/DYW, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. And if you want a taste of what's included, you can also get our free sewing planner at seamwork.com/go/free planner. So be sure to check that out. It's a really fun program. I do it every single season, and it really, really helps me to use the fabric I have and to really be more intentional about what I sew. All right. And if you liked this episode, we would love it if you would leave us a review. You can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. You can follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to become part of the Seamwork community, head over to seamwork.com/go/podcast to learn how to join. I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork, or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.